I wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to be schizoid, what it means to have these adaptations, what it means to you as a person, to others, to you in relation to others. A little bit of that. That's something I want to flesh out over the next, well, who knows how long it's going to take me. It's going to take a long time because not everything's exactly fleshed out yet. And it won't be. But there's certain aspects that I want to discuss specifically today. Little bits and pieces. It's more of a ramble on the subject, so mind you, this is a little more stream of consciousness, like most things I'm doing or say. I hope you like the angle too. I kind of dig it. I moved it down here the other day for a stream because I had like my wife and people working behind me doing some other stuff over here, and I don't like them being on camera, and I'm sure they don't like it either. And but then I kind of ended up liking this angle because I can see myself recording, but it doesn't look like I'm looking at myself. So it's actually cozier. It's more like disconnected. And you know how zoids feel cozier in a more disconnected setting, especially if we're doing something like this. Now, some of the stuff I'm about to say and intimate to you are a mixture of ideas that are understood and ideas that I've come to a conclusion on. Some of it's hypothetical, opinion based, highly subjective in some regards, so on and so forth. Absolutely up for criticism in any capacity. I don't mind criticism, especially constructive stuff. At least I can use that to differentiate between my biases and other things, and so on and so forth. So it's fun. It's fun. Uh, Mind you, that doesn't mean I'm going to read your criticism and go, oh, I'm just going to completely absorb everything you said unquestioningly. That's definitely not going to happen either. But nonetheless, I appreciate any efforts to make things more constructive. Now, when I hear the word schizoid, when I think schizoid, I think of a set of adaptations, similar to how Eleanor Greenberg likes to refer to it as. Now, prior to that, I always kind of just thought of schizoid as being, oh, you're schizoid, you're a schizoid person, you're schizoid, right? And unfortunately, using it in that manner associates it to a specific set of personality traits instead of the maladaptations that a certain type of personality might develop because of inhospitable conditions in their life or their environment from childhood and onward. I like to separate those two. In my opinion, I think there is a component that is neurological regarding the person who develops these adaptations or the type of person that does. Whether that stems from childbirth or just childhood, and it affects the fundamental brain structure of the individual to have a specific set of thought patterns, perception, or cognition, and things of that nature. I'm unsure as to the exact source. Maybe a combination of genetic components with environmental ones and the shaping of the brain through, adolescence and so on and so forth. There's not enough research on that as far as for children pertaining to that in particular. I know Burr will probably tell me, oh, but there's this and there's that. And it's like, okay, yeah, I get it, but not this specifically. Okay, and what we're talking about. If there was, we wouldn't be having this conversation all the time. Not to say that I would know what Burr would say, but I'm mostly just poking fun. So you have this type of thinking where often we refer to it as being abstract thinking because we don't really have an official word for this thing because it doesn't really have one. When I say that, I'm referring to a type of thinking that tends to place an emphasis or focus on categories of thought or concepts that kind of all encompass smaller categorizations or taxonomy, right? So instead of thinking about my neighborhood, there's my neighborhood, and then there's my city, and then there's my state, and then there's my nation, and then there's my continent, and then there's civilization, then there's humanity, then there's sentient life, then there is existence as a whole, and so on and so forth. So the further and more abstract you get, the more all encompassing those things become and those types of thoughts. Now, that means that as a kid, if you're sitting there in a classroom and they're trying to teach you something, you're probably wondering, why do I need to learn about this? What about this? And what about these things? What about all this? And why is this being done this way? And why is this thought to be more effective than this? Couldn't we try this? Doesn't this work? Isn't this more interesting? So on and so forth. So that's why a lot of these abstractor types, as we like to term them, tend to not do great in the public school system or any school system because it's not really guided in such a manner. And I'm not talking, the capacity to have thoughts like that. Anybody has the capacity to have thoughts like that. That's not the issue. That's not what I'm trying to distinguish here. The difference is that that is the default setting of a lot of the people I discuss this with. The default setting in their thinking is abstract. It's their go-to. It's their natural state. In fact, focusing too much on specific nuance tends to get boring or outmoded very quickly for them. Usually, when they do focus on specific nuance, it's in relation to these bigger scope things in order to better understand those larger scope items or concepts or ideas or whatever you want to call them. The goal is not to understand the nuance specifically. There's often an acceptance of the nuance in order to get a better answer of the larger scope issue or idea or feeling or metaphysical component or anything like that. And that brings me to another point. When you're a kid growing up with this sort of thinking, even if initially it's not as, far gone, if you want to call it that, as all that early on, and it develops further through adolescence and then, puberty and so on. Once you get your teenage years and socialization really begins to kick in your life, it is really at that point when you start realizing, my concerns, my thoughts, my preoccupations, my anxieties, my stressors, my worry, my sadness, my anger, my happiness, my joy, all those things are predicated on a set of ideas, values, and concepts that aren't really shared as cohesively with my environment and the people in which I must socialize with or interact with on a daily basis. Because I feel like an alien. I feel like a person that doesn't think like other people, that doesn't experience things like other people do, that doesn't get excited about the same things that other people do. I get excited about the wrong things, or I don't know exactly what it is I get excited about. Sometimes it feels like I don't get excited about anything. Sometimes it feels like really weird, confusing things make me sad, and some things don't make me sad at all that I'm told I should feel sad about. So on and so forth. It's unique to the individual, the circumstances, the topics, the amount of abstraction that occurs, to what extent, how it affects them, how pessimistic it is. But generally speaking, if you are diagnosed as being schizoid, you are generally very pessimistic about those abstractions. They usually kind of go in that direction. Now, the pessimism might vary depending on the subject matter. It might vary depending on the context of what you're applying it to and so forth, depending on the complexity in which you're, projecting it on. It also depends on your level of stress and, local stress, anxiety, things of that nature. Stuff like that will impact the amount of pessimism and your ability to differentiate between how realistic that pessimism is and how unrealistic it is. Like how irrational it becomes, essentially, how logically consistent that pessimism truly is, and how much you can actually attach to whatever it is you're experiencing or looking at. Now, as I've discussed before, this sometimes means that there's another kind of side issue that gets involved here, which is a generalization that often occurs, a pessimistic generalization that occurs with the schizoid person. Right? So when you combine a pessimistic generalization of categories, meaning, I was in Little League. Little League was boring. Little League involved things I didn't care about. People would get upset when I didn't do well in Little League because people cared about the game. People cared about scoring. I don't understand why people care about those things. I don't feel shame for not caring about those things. I do feel shame for feeling ostracized and rejected because I don't feel those things or because I don't care. I'm confused. This is hurtful to me. Because it's hurtful, I will now disconnect from it. I will associate it to not just Little League, but to teams. And not just teams, but to people. And not just people, but interactions as a whole, and what they represent, and how they function, and how out of place I feel against them. I now have decided to place all my pessimism onto the concept of interaction with other sentient life. Well, more specifically, human beings. Obviously, this example of Little League is just an exaggeration of how things can kind of get categorically defined in a pessimistic light over an abstract, kind of all-encompassing nature over the course of a person's lifetime. So it might start with negative experiences that are local, and as you get older, those negative experiences will then become abstracted out into negative experiences about experience as a whole, if that makes any sense. That's how bad it can get, the pessimism. It goes from bad experiences to what is experience, and is experience always this bad? And it feels like it is because, again, like I've mentioned, your way of experiencing things isn't really all that compatible with your environment, and your environment doesn't know how to kind of co-regulate your feelings, and it doesn't know how to match up with your value system, and it's not malevolent. It's not an intentional process generally, unless of course you have specifically abusive people in your life, and many of us have. But it's something that happens, and it is traumatic, and it is difficult regardless of if it's intentional, regardless of if there's blame to cast or otherwise. Many of us end up casting blame because there's a certain level of resentment. We need a target. We need something more tangible to blame, or even if it's not so tangible, but something to blame. We blame it on humanity. We blame it on people as a whole, interaction as a whole, ideas like love and friendship and so on and so forth. Not realizing that those things can actually be redefined by our own experiences and our own perceptions. That those words, those definitions, we're only using them in reference to a framework that makes little to no sense to us. And it's not the fault of the person that they're doing that. It's actually almost inevitable. I was doing that for about 20 years, if not longer. And I still struggle with doing some of that. But now I'm more self-aware. And so it helps me manage a lot of these things. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm trying to talk a little bit about what I think schizoid is when I say schizoid. When I say zoids, okay? When I say you're a zoid, I'm a zoid, we're zoids, I'm not talking about a categorical definition of a certain set of personality traits. I am talking about people that endure and deal with a set of adaptations in association to the things that I discussed. Feeling out of place, feeling like an alien, feeling like a pariah, feeling disconnected from human beings because you don't have the same emotional range regarding the same topics as they do, and the emotional range you might have possessed that's been stunted over the years due to this trauma of incompatibility is an emotional range that isn't shared with people that are around you. As you might have seen out there in research or people discussing schizoid, they talk about how they have empathy. They have this thing called cognitive empathy, and it runs deep and it affects them. Also, people that believe that state that they have affective empathy. It's just not for, say, conventional things that people would have affective empathy about. Because the things that other people get sad about or affected by are not the things that would make you sad, and so that affective empathy doesn't kind of kick off. But yet, I've spoken to schizoids that say they have affective empathy for animals, for concepts, for human beings as a species, and less so for the isolated individual, for all sorts of things that ruins their days because they read a news article or see something that reminds them of something else, that abstracts into something else, and then that ruins their day, not the original action itself. But it does trigger what does ruin their day on that kind of spiraling playing field that I mentioned before regarding pessimism and categorization and abstraction. Okay. To me, those adaptations, that suffering, those difficulties, those hardships, those negative symptoms associated to it, such as anhedonia, avolition, depression, so on and so forth, anxiety disorders, anything else associated to things like, I don't know, existential dread, existential angst, existential fears of every type and form, existential apathy, so on and so forth. Okay? Those are what I'm referring to when I say zoids, when I say schizoids, is people that possess those adaptations. And those adaptations are a way to cope with a reality that feels fundamentally inhospitable to you. In your search for an answer, in a search to grip, to desperately need, to have a reason for why everything is so awful or feels so awful, this is the response to that. Withdrawal, disconnect, oftentimes disassociation, in a more pessimistic light, because all disassociation, as many of you who have maybe partaken in certain substances understand, is not bad. Not all disassociation is bad. This type of disassociation, because it's tied to all this pessimism, fear, and so on, is not good at all. This type of depersonalization, this type of derealization is not fun, and it's not healthy. Okay? Good. So I hope that clarified one or two things regarding what I mean when I say schizoid or zoids. All right, so now for the second part of this. And by the way, if I missed a nuance or point or specific example or so on and so forth, fine, I missed it. I can't find it all for this one ramble that I'm doing, okay? If you want to discuss this further, if you want to talk about this further, next time I'm doing a stream, bring it up, talk about it, mention it. If you really want me to notice it, do some kind of super chat or something so I really see it, and then I talk about it and I hash it out and I figure it out. Especially if it's some kind of criticism that you think you want to levy at me that's so, in your head is like, oh, this is a fundamental thing that needs to be discussed. It's like, okay, fine. That's what I do streams for, like almost daily right now. So use that opportunity to do that. Second half of what I want to talk about is, in my opinion, just as important, just as valuable, at least within regards to the community building itself. What I am attempting is to create a community with a server, the channel, the streams, and anything else that others help me create and is associated to these things that I guess, started using this project. I lost my train of thought there, but the point is, I'm trying to build a community of people that have these adaptations. Okay. When I first started this community, I didn't really understand what it was that schizoid meant, because the psychological therapeutic community didn't really understand themselves. Based on the information you find in, say, the DSM, ICD, and everything else, it's just a clusterfuck of stuff that doesn't seem to make too much sense. Some of it's contradictory, some of it applies to you, some of it doesn't. Even if, like, you have 10 people that are diagnosed schizoid by a professional, some of the stuff applies, some of it doesn't, some of it does sort of, some of it does, but in a different kind of way that isn't specified in the literature, so on and so forth. It gets very, very complicated. Okay, so it kind of took me a while, and a lot of discussion, a lot of reading, and a lot of interacting and helping zoids and connecting to them in a way that was safe, comfortable, and made sense to a schizoid to be able to get to this point. I've done my homework, I've done the effort, I've given it my all, and I will continue giving it my all. So the stuff I'm saying isn't just coming from some fucking armchair bullshit position, okay? I'm doing the homework, I'm doing the effort, I'm putting in the practice on a daily basis at times. It is exhausting, but it is worthwhile. So that's why I want to bring up this next point and why I find it so valuable. Zoids are not a uniform type of people. As I mentioned, it is not a uniform type of people with a uniform set of traits. Okay? It is not a personality type. I just want to clarify that. And the reason I want to say that is because you're going to come across zoids on the server if you decide to join it that you're not going to like. You're going to come across zoids that you find toxic. You're going to come across zoids that you find obnoxious, confusing, dumb, self-righteous, pretentious. You're going to convince yourself that they're this and this and this and this and that. Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe you're not. Maybe they're a dick. Maybe they're not a dick. Maybe you're just a pussy. I don't know. Okay? I don't care about that. My point is that these people come in fundamentally different shapes, forms, sizes, and experiences, traumas, as well as comorbids, right? You can have a BPD schizoid. You can have a narzoid, as Eleanor has referred to many times. You can have an ASPD zoid. You can have all those things, paranoid, schizotypal, that display other types of PD adaptation-based traits. That is something that can exist. There is no such thing as someone that is primarily schizoid with a little dab of this and a little dab of that. There's people that have schizoid adaptations that have a negative impact or an impact on their life and on their functionality to varying degrees, that have individual personalities, quirks, obnoxious behavior, and so on, that is unique to them. You know, they have unique traumas, they have unique types of behavior, interests, beliefs, and education, hard-headedness, stubbornness, and one of those things specifically is, especially since it involves cluster A, and there is a reason, not the reason they probably think, in my opinion, but there is a reason that paranoids, schizotypals, and schizoids are kind of thrown into one category, regardless of how many problems that creates and the reasons behind why they categorize them the same. There is a reason. This isn't just a big, silly, arbitrary coincidence. Now, I'm not about to sit here and tell you what that reason is. That's not what this video is about. And maybe I don't even understand fully or comprehend what that is. I can just theorize, and people that I work with can do the same. And they could explain it probably better than even I can, at least on a more technical level. My point being is that if you're on the server and you're in a community of people that have a set set of adaptations, and that is fundamentally why you're creating this community, not just because of the adaptations, but because you can find relatability in those people because of the previously mentioned abstract sort of thinking, the idiosyncratic thinking, combined with what they often also refer to as autistic thinking, and so on and so forth. They call it all kinds of shit. Point is, different neurodivergent thinking that is associated more, seemingly, based on my analysis, more exclusive to schizoids. Okay, and, cluster A peeps and stuff like that. But the adaptations and the suffering that this community is built around, that understanding, that similar understanding. Not that we're all the same as far as how we handle our life and our experiences in every capacity. You're going to have schizoids that are going to be in a moment of high stress. They're going to be in a moment of spiraling depression. They might get a bit irrational. They might stop being as stoic as you prefer them to be. They might stop going from being calm and stoic to being kind of hard to understand, seemingly nonsensical and irrational. Right? Emotionally scared and driven. Okay. It's going to happen sometimes. The reaction to that should not be to go, this person is intrusive and obstructive and they should be removed from this place. That is not what needs to happen, especially if it's not a thing that is normally intrusive and disruptive about that person. What we need to do is figure out what's happening, be compassionate about that situation, and then have a spot for them to go to and seek help, and that anybody that's actually interested in dealing with it will. And schizoids that are not interested in dealing with it don't have to. They can just stay wherever the hell they want. And that's fine. Either way, it's a way to deal with it. If I have a schizoid that's dealing with alcoholism, or a schizoid that's dealing with drug use, or a schizoid that's dealing with suicidal ideation, or anything like that, I'm not going to tell them, your problem isn't specifically schizoid. And so you need to GTFO, or take it somewhere else, or suppress it, because if you don't, it's problematic and derails my conversations and causes me problems. Okay? That's not how that works. That's not how a community for support and advocacy functions. If that doesn't work for you, I can't help you. If it's not a place that you like, sorry. Deal with it or don't. Whatever. That's all I can do. What we do is we help each other, regardless of the problems that those people may possess. I'm not saying you have to, and I'm not saying they can just start plopping this shit anywhere they want on the server or otherwise, or say going into my live chat during a stream and just start posting all kinds of stuff that either they're going through something or whatever, and they're kind of going, a little bit overboard with it. No, there's a time and a place for these things. That's why I have places on the server for things that are not specifically schizoid that you want to talk. There is a section called Serious on the server, and there's a section called Support under Serious. Now, when you have a schizoid and they're dealing with a problem that isn't specifically schizoid, say it's some BPD related issue or narcissism related issue or otherwise, or some kind of intrusive thoughts, or something that has to do with aphantasia or whatever, that is a person that has schizoid adaptations that is dealing with a problem. And that problem might manifest in a unique and different way because of those adaptations and because of the abstract thinking I aforementioned. And who's better for helping those people that have that similar cognition and have those similar overlaying adaptations? I can't think of better people to be there and support them than other people with that kind of stuff. And if you're not the type of person that can do that, say somebody's dealing with alcoholism, but you're not an alcoholic. Okay, maybe that's not a conversation you can help them with or support them with. But if you're a schizoid and you've dealt with, say, addiction, then maybe you can have a conversation with them and help support them in their time of need. Who would have thunk, right? And you might do a better job at helping them with that than, say, a neurotypical person that is undergoing the same issues. They might feel more comfortable because they were already more comfortable to talk to schizoids to begin with, to people like them, more easily. So they might be able to explain it in a way that might make sense. That which drives, say, their addiction or whatever kind of use they're enduring or whatever kind of actions they're taking, or that which drives their other personality disorders or comorbids or their generalized anxiety disorder, might be very unique to the experience of the abstractor / cluster A schizoid. We need to be there for each other if you so choose to be. If you just want to hang out on the server and just be cozy, that's fine too. If you want to be helped when you need it, but you want to help other people's when they need it, I don't care. Whatever. No one is obligating you. That's the last thing a schizoid wants, is obligations or impositions or intrusions. It's an anathema to our sense of feeling autonomous and separated and safe in any capacity. Okay? It fucks with our adaptations. In any case, that's what I wanted to differentiate. That's what I wanted to talk about. I think that's a very important thing to distinguish. All those things I mentioned. Okay? So this video might not be all that useful to people that just watch my channel or so on and so forth, but at least the first half might have been more useful. Is the separation of what is schizoid adaptations and what is a personality. Those things are not one and the same. A lot of those things need to be separated because if you conflate them, guess what happens? You get a lot of fun in-group, out-group action. You get a lot of purity spiraling. You get a lot of, this person is not a real schizoid. This person is not a real, not a true. They're more this than that. They don't belong here. They're causing problems with their existence in my presence. Sorry, that's not how a support and advocacy server functions. And it won't function that way. Now, am I saying we need a free-for-all? No. Does there have to be rules in place? Yes. Do those rules need to be enforced? Yes. Do we need to create an environment that's fundamentally functional, calm, collected? Because that's how most schizoids are most of the time? Yes. If there's a hiccup in all that, should it be removed like a cancer? No. If a person's comorbids or issues become so problematic that it impacts the ability to have a functional community, or it's negatively impacting the community as a whole, should they be put through, realistic consequences or talk to or discuss their behavior with them? Yes. If they become belligerent and don't want to listen and don't care, should they be removed? Yes. Should they be removed because we don't like them and they're yucky and they're annoying? No. Should they be removed because they're becoming problematic to community building? Yes. We need to differentiate a lot of these things. And a lot of people don't seem to be able to do that, and hopefully they can work on it. You not liking something, you or a small portion of people not digging something, is not reason enough to remove it entirely. That is not how this works. This isn't a club. This isn't a hangout zone. This is a support and advocacy community. Simple as. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Zoid out and all that good shit.